Hi there and welcome to today's Delicious Art video art class. Today we're going to be painting a beautiful field of yellow and pink and purple and white flowers. And the backdrop is up against a row of trees which are very dark and have a beautiful strong contrast. So I really love painting things with strong contrasts. I think it really helps the brights look brighter and the darks look darker. It creates a bit of drama in your painting. So that's exciting for me. So welcome. I hope you enjoyed the class. What you should have is the class notes either printed out or on a screen next to you. I've also sent you the images. So I've sent you both of these images as separate images so you can look at those on a screen or on your phone or an iPad and zoom right in if you need to look at the detail. So I find that really helpful to have on a different screen as I'm sitting here, because I can look at it, look at the image and get up close and get into the detail and see what's happening. These are the colors we'll be using today, and we'll select those as we go. But that's what I've chosen so far. I will probably end up adding more to it, but it's a good place to start. Okay, so I'll pop those aside for now. The class is going to go in two parts today. So the first part, as you may have read here, is about doing the charcoal drawing, and that will take us not too long, I hope. And we're just focusing on the darks and the lights and the layout of the image in here. And then we'll do the second part of the class, which will be the pastel onto the pastel matte paper. So I've got my pastel matte paper here. It's an aubergine or elephant. I think this one's called aubergine. It's a lovely colour, and I'll talk about that a bit more later on. For now, though, we're going to focus on drawing this picture in charcoal, because it's really important to do this for a couple of reasons. One is that you get to look at the layout of the picture and the composition, and the darks and the lights. So it's all about finding the tone and really noticing how much dark and how much light is in there and where it sits within the image. It's also a great way to look at your grid lines, which I've put onto the color version here. And that helps us to draw this up in proportion. So there's not a real lot of detail in this today as far as drawing goes. We just need to notice how high the horizon line sits inside the whole thing. And the rule of thumb is that thirds is a great way to go. So say we've got the trees in the top third and then the foreground in the two bottom thirds. So that's a really good composition to have in a landscape. And to notice that the halfway line is here, so that sits up about that high, and just where everything sits in relation to those separate grids. When I do a more detailed drawing, we usually break it up into smaller quarters. But for today, we'll just focus on using the 4 grids. So if you want to grab some willow charcoal, I've got a little box here of all different sizes of willow, plus a little blending stick if I feel like I need that. So I like to draw loosely with a longer stick and just hold it loose in my fingers so that it kind of just runs around the page without being held too tight. If you hold it tight like a pen or a pencil, that keeps your wrist in a very small area and you can't really get very big movements with it. Whereas if you hold it nice and loose like this, you can actually have a lot more freedom in your arm and where the stick moves to. So if you want to draw up just a very loose thumbnail area, so this is the area we're going to be drawing inside today, and it's the same shape as the picture, so make sure you do it in a portrait shape, so that's shorter at the top and the bottom and longer on the sides, because that's the shape we're drawing in today. Then we can rule up our grid lines. So if you want to measure, you can get it precise. I'm just going to go by eye here, and put your grid line onto your page like that. The other thing I want to mention is that it's a good idea just to tape your paper down if it's sitting loose on your board, just so that you don't have to hold on to it and you've got a free hand. So I just like to tape it down on the corners or the sides, just loosely like that, just so it doesn't move around, and then I can keep it nice and still. So let's have a look at our grid section first. You can see on the picture here that the horizon line, which is the end of all the flowers and the beginning of the trees, I'm going to call that our horizon line, sits at about that high. So it's about that level there. So if you want to draw a line across there, that shows us where the horizon line is. And now we can start to look at the shapes of the trees in the background. So you can see up in the back corner here, it's quite kind of grey and misty. So that would be trees that are further away from us. Because they're further away, they're more blurred. So that's kind of a grey, misty area. But here we have a definite tree shape, don't we? So that's a little triangular shape. So let's draw that one in at about here. So just draw triangles or whatever shapes you see for now. And then we can come across to here and we can look at this tree shape. So it's got a beautiful big arc that comes right down on the left-hand side from the top of the page all the way down to our horizon line. And it curves out a little bit. So let's just draw a lovely curved arc like that. It comes down to our horizon line. Okay, so there are basic tree shapes so far. Then if you look at the other side of this big tree here, it curves down to about there inside that grid line. Okay, hard to see sometimes when you've got a lot of darks. That's why I'm kind of looking at this version first, because I can see a little bit more clearly where that tree line sits. So there are two prominent trees that are on the left side. Then we come across here and we've just got some kind of soft marks. They're a little bit blurry, but it just sort of splodges of green through there. So just do a little bit of a loose shape across to there. Kind of the tops of the trees, but we can't see the bottoms of them because they're in shadow and they're dark. And then as we come across, we've got this beautiful lit up edge here on the right hand side, and it's quite zigzaggy, isn't it? It kind of goes down like that. We can see that lovely light edge. So let's just draw in a loose shape like that that might indicate that light edge of the tree. And then everything else is kind of dark and green and different shades of darks, really. So that's our basic layout for our trees up here. That's our outlines. We're going to put a little bit more information in there when we pick up the charcoal and start to do some shading. So now we can move down into this section here, and this is all grasses and flowers, isn't it? It's quite lovely. So when I'm doing, I've actually spotted, is that a little bit of water back there? Where that odd little white triangle is, I have to ignore that. Oh, things coming in the window. I feel like that might be a bit of a river or something just there in that corner. So let's have a look at that. That will be a bit more interesting to give it a bit of interest. So that's like a triangular shape that sits up like this on the horizon. There's a bit of water there. So that's fun. We can add that into, I literally had not seen that before. And obviously, I think, let me zoom in on my picture here. It's going to get in really close. That little triangle looks like it's some sort of signpost or something that's sitting there, but we might ignore that because it's not terribly attractive. And everything underneath here is really dark, so that's super dark in there. We can't really see what's going on. The light is obviously on the left side of this picture. So if you think about where's the light coming from, it's coming from probably behind and up on the left, because we've got light catching on this part of the tree here on the right side, on the outside fronds, on the left side of it. And this big tree here also has light catching it on that left side. And the top of this one is a little bit lighter as well. So that's telling us where the light's coming from. It's really important to notice those things. Okay, so let's put a bit of water in there. That'll be nice. And then for all this grass, we're just going to do lots of this sort of thing. Just want you to let your charcoal stick wander around over here, and we're just going to block in or darken some areas, leave some light, but don't worry if you can't leave the light because it's a bit tricky with charcoal to leave the light. We can use the kneadable erasers to get some light in there. Okay, so just do these beautiful grassy marks, just little soft marks like this. Then we can blur that in once we've filled all this area. I want to try and do it with these marks because when we fill it in, it'll give it a nice blurred sort of background then that we can put all the flowers and bits and pieces on the top of. So this will be quite a long process when we get to do it in the colour version because there's a lot of grass in here and we're going to find ways to fill it all up without doing every single little flower. And obviously the ones in the front closest to us are bigger, aren't they, because they're closer. And the stuff in the background is a lot smaller and probably not as defined because it's further away. So once you've done this kind of thing and filled up most of that foreground, I want you to grab a finger and just blur it off like this with your finger. Okay, so we just want to blend that in. If you look closely at a black and white version, you can see there are sort of patches of grey and lighter patches throughout the grass. Underneath all the plants and things, there's this very subtle tone of greys happening in there. So to achieve that, we need to get a couple of tones of grey down underneath. I'm just going to pick up a shorter bit of charcoal because now I want to start to sort of shade it a little bit more. So what I'm doing now is I've got my short piece of charcoal and I'm lying it flat on the page, which I do a lot with charcoal and pastel. And I'm just going to zhoosh it around, making random little areas of shadow. So if you look closely, see in behind here, you can see quite a lot of shadow underneath the flowers. So just marking in some shadowy areas like that, that can contribute to bringing these lighter flowers and getting them to sit forward for us. So you've got to have this beautiful contrast underneath things to make it work. So once you've blocked in shadow like that, then you can just get your finger again and just don't press too hard, but just very lightly run your finger around over it. Move it in random kind of directions. So try to sort of keep your finger on the paper lightly and just run it up and down, round and round, side to side, all different directions. We're trying to create a really organic kind of pattern in there. So that's the sort of thing we want it to look like. Something like that. And then we can build our grasses on top. But we'll go back up to the trees first before we hit any more of the grass and the water. So let's have a look at the water. The water is a mid-tone grey, so it's a similar grey to what we've just put down the front here. So we're going to keep that in a mid-tone. We might even add a little bit of shine to it just to make it a bit of a feature later on. So that's our mid-tone grey. It's kind of a little bit darker just towards the riverbank. So darken that off and then smudge it again. So there's a lot of putting down and smudging and retouching just to get the right tones and shades going on. Okay, that'll make more sense when we start to bring our flowers up in front like this. All right, now up into the trees in the background, let's have a look there. When I'm doing a portrait, landscape, I like to work from back to front. And the reason is that if we get the background in here first, then we can come forward and put the trees on top of that. Then we can come forward and put the grass in front of that. So it's just a logical process really as far as landscapes go. And top to bottom is usually the way I'll go as well, which makes sense because the sky's in the background. Then you've got your next row of trees. Then you've got your, your foreground grasses, etc. So top to bottom and back to front. So let's have a look at this smudged little back area here, up in this back corner. It's just sort of a blur. We're just going to smush a bit of charcoal in there. Again, I've got my short piece and it's on its side, just lying it flat down on there. And then I'm going to push it in, because when I push it in, then I can add more over the top. And it's the same theory with pastels. So I'm just going to push it in and then I can add a bit more. And what I'm going to do is make it quite dark, because we want this front tree to have that beautiful shine, that sunshine on the edges of it. To make that shine, we need dark behind it. Okay, so let's make this back area here just really dark up against that tree. And then we can kind of fuzz it off as it moves across the sky a little bit. So making just a blurry kind of shapes like that. And then this tree here in the front is a little bit lighter than that background there, isn't it? So it's got grey in it. So grey that down. The top of it is lighter than this bit of grey here. So let's push that in a little bit. We want it to sort of come forward but not be too light. Okay. And then moving down the side of this big tree here, it's actually got a lot of, oh, isn't that interesting? Okay, what I'm doing is I've just noticed the picture in colour, you can see the whole tree, but the black and white one you can't. So I've cropped that too much. So let's just focus on this one and convert it to black and white in our minds. Okay, so it's much darker at the bottom, isn't it? That tree there on the far left. It's dark at the bottom, and then as it comes up, we can sort of see the shape of the branches. It's like a fir tree. It's quite thick and lush. So what we want to do is start to create some shadow in underneath where those little branches are, and keep the top of it fairly light so that it sits forward from the things behind it. But we want to try and keep the stuff on the left of the next tree dark so that we can get those highlights to really shine. So just a few little bits of light in here. Where's my kneadable eraser? Let me go grab that. Just show you how to use that to get some light back in. Okay, so this is the kneadable eraser. If you haven't seen one before, they look like and feel like blue tack, and you can pull them apart. You can use small pieces. You can squish them around. What they do is they pick up the pigment, or they blend for you, and then you can just knead the pigment into the eraser. They eventually get quite black and filthy, and then you just buy a new one. They come in a light grey colour. So what this can do, I'll show you, is we can actually touch up some of the lights with this. We can use it like we would a brush or a pen or something, and get some of the light back in where you may put down too much dark. So see how that works like that? It's a really good little tool with your charcoal. And when you dab it like this, what happens is it picks up the charcoal, so you can see it on the bottom of the eraser there, little black stuff. And I don't want to put that back down, because if I keep dabbing, it's just going to add more or put it back on the page. So when I want to keep it nice and clean, I just knead it again with my hand and then find a new area that's reasonably clean and keep going. So you can just keep doing that until you have taken up enough light out. But now I've taken too much out, so I want to darken this off a little bit more just through here. The branches on the tree are kind of horizontal shape. So just do some little squiggly marks that might indicate horizontal branches. And then I can pick up my eraser again, and I can make a knife edge with it, so you can make different shapes, and just pop it in here to put those little lines back in. Hopefully make it look like a tree. I've kind of lost the top of it now, so I'm going to have to darken off again behind it, because I lightened up too much with the eraser. So I'm just going to darken off back here to help this tree sit forward. So it's all about the darks and the lights. That's what you've got to be very aware of, is the lights and the darks and how they react together, and how they, if you can't have light without dark, so you've got to have both. Just going to lighten up the edges of that tree there, just to make it look like it's catching the sun. Doesn't look anything like a tree, but never mind. So now we can move over to this tree. Now it's really dark on the bottom, but it's really light on that left hand edge. So what we can do is use our kneadable eraser again to get some of the light back in there. But let's darken off first, and we might move all the way across the page and just go all the way over to here and darken off as much as we can. We want to get that as dark as possible. If you're using willow charcoal, you might find it doesn't get black enough sometimes, so you might need different charcoal. But for this exercise, it's enough. We're not going to get too caught up in the precision of it. This is just a little process to study the tones and be aware of what's happening in here. Okay. Now, as you move up to the top, we're going to start to just lift up the charcoal a little bit so you're not pressing quite as hard so that we don't get all black in there. We want to try and keep it sort of mid to dark tones. So I'm just dabbing it to soften that off a little bit and lighten it a touch. And then I can come back in with some darks and I can get those darks to sit in there. Look at the shape of the darks in amongst the trees too. So you call that negative space. It'll be the space around the branches, and that's the dark area because there's shadow behind and underneath them. So look at those shapes to see where everything is. Again, it's quite hard to kind of make it all out, but just do marks like that. And in the end, the trees in the background don't really need a lot of definition. They just need to support what's happening in the foreground, but we still want to make sure that they have enough light and dark to give us information about what they actually are. Okay, so this big one here, if you look at the shape of that one, it's got a lot of dark at the base here, and then as it comes up to the top, it gets a little bit lighter, but we've still got bits of dark in there. So we still want to keep it, you know, have different shades of tones throughout this, because trees are, you know, organic. They have their own shapes. And we've got to try and make it look as organic as we can. So just making sure we keep that really dark at the bottom. And then as we come across to the left side, we still need some charcoal on that area, because then we're going to take some off with our kneadable eraser to get that beautiful light in on that side there. So just practicing the shapes. Darken off where you might feel like you need to make something a bit darker. It's really interesting looking at the tones of these things. Okay, so that's lovely and dark. And then we've got our mid-tones towards the top. Okay, now with the kneadable eraser, we can actually, because they're little lines basically coming off the side of the tree, I've made a little, like a knife edge, blade edge shape on my eraser. And I'm just going to put that down here like this and dab it on around the edge there where the sun's catching those branches. And when you need a clean edge, you just reshape it and find another clean part. Try to do it sort of randomly though, because they're not all the same size or width or whatever. But we want to make sure we make it look organic and get a little bit of light in there. It goes all the way up to the top. So see how that's highlighted that side of the tree? It's starting to look like it's got the light shining on there. If you want to, you know, put light back in somewhere else, you can do that too. So that's kind of what we're trying to achieve. It's just that bit of light coming down on that left-hand edge. It's kind of not as light towards the bottom, so you can put a bit more charcoal over that if you've gone too light. So what we're trying to do is create these beautiful little highlights up here, but we need some darks in between them just to break them up a little bit and make them look organic. Okay, so just some little fine lines of dark in there. If you have a look at the picture, you can see there's little bits of dark. That's obviously looking through to what's behind the tree. So just break it up a little bit with some dark marks. If you've taken too much off, you can come back with the eraser and put it more in. when we do this with pastel, we'll be using light coloured pastels. So we won't be using the eraser. I just find it works really nicely with charcoal. It's a lovely, lovely tool to have in your kit, and it's great for blending pastels as well. So I'm just lightening up a few of those branches again, just to bring that tree forward from what's behind it. So you can dab, you can do it a few times to get it whiter or lighter. You can leave it dark. All sorts of fun things. It's fun to play with. So let me just back up here. And then over here on the right side, so we didn't fill that guy in. So I want to get back into there and fill in this area over here. Try to leave a little bit of white undone if you can, with those shiny branches on this one, because it's quite bright. So I've tried to leave a little bit of the paper there unfilled with charcoal, and then I'm going to just softly come in from the left side and try to kind of break up those branches and make a few holes in there, a few sky holes. It's not quite working yet, but I need to get more light into around the front of it so it looks like it's all joining up. We'll do that in a minute with the eraser. Okay, and so now I can bring my eraser in, and there's lots of little dots in that one. So now you can make a bit of a point with your eraser like that and just dot. You'll have to keep making points though, that's the only problem. So you can just do little dots, take out some of the dark and get the lights back in. And they're kind of in rows, those little dots, aren't they? So you could potentially make a knife edge as well and just put some little shapes down like that. It's more a thundery sky than anything, but anyway. Mm-hmm. So that's a little bit of you know, demo about how to do some lights and darks with charcoal. And we've still got these lovely little, you know, tree shapes through here where they've probably gone a bit light now, but catching the light softly through the background there. And this guy, he's the dominant one, this big tree. So I'm just lightening up a little bit more on him. Then lighten up the edges of it around here. Again, so you can keep coming back in and touching things up as you go. All right, now let's have a look at this little bit of water here. I want to make that a little bit more prominent, so we might just bring it across a bit further. And as I said before, it's not quite as dark as the trees, so it's got to be a little bit lighter. So that's our tree bank. Just going to smudge some of this. Use your fingers too, don't be afraid to stick your fingers in there, although I find I make fingerprints more than anything. Now we can focus on this grass. So remember, we've already put down a background, all right? So now we want to start to looking at making some grassy shapes. And we're going to do that with this eraser, all right? So we're going to do some grassy shapes with the eraser first. Get a little bit of light back in here and there. We don't want to do it too, you know, all over the place. We just want to put a few in here and there just to create that feeling of that thick, lush grass. Then we'll go over it with charcoal. So we're going to start to draw grass in with charcoal. See the edge here across where the top of the grass is in front of the trees? We want to bring some of that up. So we want to kind of make that look more feathery, not a hard straight line. So with your eraser, just start to fluff around that edge a little bit. Okay. Give it a bit of a fluffy kind of edge. It's not even, it's uneven. There's different heights of grasses throughout there. So we just want to soften off that edge a little bit. And same down here where the river bank is, we can do a little bit of that in front of the river too. So see how I'm just moving that eraser kind of in a vertical direction and just marking in little grassy marks like that. Try to avoid making rows or patterns. It's really hard because we're humans and we make patterns. It's what we do. But you can just keep doing this kind of thing. And then once we've done some of that, then we'll come back over it with our charcoal. So just running around here like this. What we're trying to create is that thick, grassy effect. And it's all about tone. Okay. So once you've done that with the eraser, then you can pick up your charcoal again and do a bit more of these ones. So see how I'm just doing this soft little grassy shapes. I'm using that long stick of charcoal because it's quite thin and I want it to be a thin piece so that I can get these grassy effects happening. And I'm just going to, starting at the back too, because we're going to work forward. Everything at the back is a little bit further away and a bit blurred and soft. And as we come forward, it gets stronger. Okay, so we're just coming forward, working our way forward. Try not to make, rows and stripes. Break up the stripes if you can with different lengths of grass or flowers. So just bringing it forward like this. Vary the direction too, so don't have them all going straight up and down. Kind of curl them a little bit, come in from different angles, slightly angled. Some can be bent. Do some little bent ones. This is kind of all the background stuff in the foreground, if that makes sense. That's the stuff that's under everything. I've got to get all the under stuff done first. Now, as I'm coming forward, I'm making longer marks, okay, because they're sort of taller in the front. Now, we might have to push some of this in and soften it off a little bit because it might be a bit too heavy or too dark. It's hard not to make rows, isn't it? And as you get forward now, we're just going to do some shorter ones in the front because, they're still bigger, but they're shorter because they're growing down beyond the picture. But we just want to achieve something like that. Okay. Once you've done that, then I just want you to get your finger and just tap it. Tap your finger on there like this, just to soften things off a little bit here and there. All right, because they're very strong, all those dark marks. So just tapping, 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 tapping. And see how that's starting to create a really lovely full look. It's starting to look lovely and full and lush with all the flowers. So tapping randomly just to blend it in a tiny bit, but don't rub it. If you rub it, you'll lose all the lines that we just made. And now, I'm just going to finish off quickly now because I want to get onto the colour version. Just going to do, see how some of those flowers have a very dark bottom on them? So they've got little dark bottoms like this. See those baby ones there at the back? And then coming forward, we can put some more little dark marks on. These are those little flowers. They've got a dark bottom and a light top. Coming forward, forward, forward. They get a bit bigger as we get closer to the foreground. And there's a few little you can also do some little random dots around the place like that indicate lots and lots of tiny, tiny flowers that are filling up this field. Over on the right side, we've got more, just not as many, but there are more of the little ones with the dark bottoms. I don't know what kinds of flowers they are. And as we come forward, we've got more darker ones and larger. And some of them have, you know, long stems that you can put on as you get closer to the foreground. Some are tall, they can go up there like that. So I know we've got lots of little flowers in here, and we're not going to do every single petal because they're too tiny. We're just going to make shapes that help us to tell the story of what these are. So some of those little dark ones are in the foreground. Just pop a bit of a stem on them. A little stem like that. Just to make it lovely and lush and thick. And we've got lots of little ones back here. More grass. If you feel like you need to add more grass, throw a bit more, a few more lines in there for grasses. And then remember up the back there, see at the back we've got those little light ones that pop up above the grass line. So they're quite lovely. Okay, so now what we're going to do, and we'll do this with white or light colours with pastel, but with the charcoal we can use the eraser again just to get some light on the top of those little dark spots that we've put in. Okay, so make a little shape, something that's not going to be too big on your eraser. So something like that, little round edge, and just touch it onto each one. And hopefully it'll start to look like they've got a lighter top. See how that's working? Really subtle. I haven't cleaned my edge. I might have to do that now. You can get a few done before you've got to make a new edge. See how that little bit of light just brings them forward, gives them some sunshine, and brings them to life. And we don't have to be terribly, precise about the shape, as long as we touch it just on the top of each little dark spot, and that'll make a flower. It's amazing what tone will do. This is a really good exercise in tone. So just keep finding a clean side on your eraser. If it's getting too dirty, just knead it and find another bit. And look at these beautiful light flowers here in the front. So we've got some lovely lighter ones here. I'm going to make a few light spots for those ones. And then I'll come back with my charcoal and I'll put a bit of shadow in there. So some lovely light flowers here. Here. Just making little spaces for those. Some little light ones over here as well. Just putting a bit of light in here and there. And a few little tiny bits of light just at the back there to indicate, white flowers or light coloured ones, or the tops of the little dark ones catching the light. See how that's starting to come alive with the tone? And before I finish using the eraser, I just want to come back and I'm going to try and put some of these light ones in the background there. See how they're coming up above the grass line into this lovely dark area, which is why we want that to be really dark, so we can get some little highlights through here. So just doing, it's hard to get fine lines, I know. I'm just going to try and do some fine lines, draw them on. There we go, that's better. Just a few little fine lines coming out of the grasses like that. Doesn't have to be too many, just have a few, just as a little highlight up against that lovely dark background. Okay, some little strokes like that, little soft wispy marks that might look like flowers or stems. So once you've done that, see how you need the dark behind it to get the light to shine. Now we can do some little dots on top of them, because that's what they are. That's what they look like. Little dots on top of the stems that we just drew. Oops, might have gone too long. But that just indicates, the sun's catching those little pieces at the back there because they're taller and they're poking up. They're reaching up to the sky. Beautiful. And now I can come back in here with my charcoal. See these white ones that we marked out before? Just mark underneath them a little bit with a bit of a dark tone. Something like that. Just a very loose little mark. And then put it on a stem. So just underneath, because the light's hitting the top of the flowers, we're creating shadow on the bottom. So that just makes them come alive. That light against dark really does help to bring your flowers out. So we'll be doing a very similar process with the pastels, but we won't be using an eraser, we'll be using pastels to put the lights and darks in. There's two there, make two. So just notice the bottoms of the flowers are darker in shadow and the tops are light. So just make them into a little cup shape. And I'm just doing little soft squiggly marks like this. Not a hard line, just soft marks to give those flowers some light and dark. And some can have a big bendy stem in the front there. Because there's a couple in the front there that sort of are really tall and they sort of come up from the bottom of the page. There's a couple of darker flowers there too, so you can have some, they're a darker colour, an orangey red colour. So you can make some of those. This one here has a dark centre and then yellow petals. So there's a couple like that actually. So that's how it's really good to do a practice drawing in charcoal before you do it in pastel, because it just helps you think about the tones and things that you're going to make. So if you have a dark center, you can do little dots like that to create the light petals around it. This one. Something like that. So I think we might leave it there so we can move on to our color version. But as I said, that's just given us a really nice view of the tones and getting familiar with the picture and working out the strategy and what we're going to do for the next round. All right, so we need to take off our white paper and then take down our pastel paper. I've chosen this aubergine color because it's complementary to yellow. So yellow and purple are complementary colors and they work really nicely together. And I think this will be a nice color to go underneath all this yellow to create a bit of shadow and give me some depth. Again, tape your paper down. So if you want to keep the edges nice and clean, then tape it all the way around, cover up this white border, and then when you're finished, you can take that off and it'll look nice and fresh and clean and tidy. If you're like me and you don't want to do that, you can just tape down the corners. Depends whether you're on an easel or not. If you're on an easel, you might want to tape it because that'll help it stay there. And again, I just like to tape it so I don't have to use my other hand to hold it down. So once you've got your paper ready, then we can rule up our grid line. And we really don't need to do too much of a grid line. So just keep it fairly basic. We'll just do the half and half. So it's 11.5 across because this one's 23 wide and it's 30 tall, which is 15 halfway. Really hot here today. Okay, so that's my grid line. And I've used a white charcoal pencil because I'm on a dark paper. It won't matter in the end because we'll fill the whole thing up. But I really like a white charcoal pencil as opposed to pastel pencils. It's a little bit easier to remove. So if you need to draw with this and then maybe remove these lines later, if you're not filling in the background, then the white charcoal pencil is a good option. So if you see them in the shops, grab them. The other option is you can use just normal charcoal. So if you're on a light paper, and this would do for either, then you could use a stick of charcoal to draw up. And again, that's easier to take off than pastel if you want to rub it out. and you just use the kneadable eraser to do that. Okay, so now we've got our grid drawn up. And remember too, if you're watching this video, you can always pause, put me on hold if you're catching up, or, you know, finish it tomorrow, whatever you want to do. It doesn't expire, so you've got it for life. Okay, so if I'm speeding through a little bit, just press stop or pause, and that'll give you a minute to catch up, or you can even rewind. All right, let's have a look. So we've got our grid line in. Remember, we're going to draw, excuse me, the line in here for where the grass goes, and it's a fuzzy sort of line. It's not a hard line. Okay, so I want to keep it quite soft and fuzzy. And then across on the right side, we're just going to dip it down a little bit because I want to get that water in there. Okay, bit of water in there. And that's a triangle shape just here on that right-hand side. And then we've got our trees. So let's just loosely mark in the shapes of our trees. Just the outlines will do. This one comes up here and it comes down through there. So I just want to put a basic outline of those lighter parts of the trees we can see. And that's probably about all we need to draw in, really. So our trees, we've got the row where the top of the grasses come to, and that little triangular area for the water, which is quite yellow looking, isn't it? Interesting. Everything's yellow and green. And we don't need to worry about anything down in this end at this stage. So we're going to start up in the top, and we're going to start with our darkest colours. So I mentioned in the notes that colours like select a range of darks and mauve and purples. So darks, I'll show you on this bit of paper. You can't get enough dark. This is a dark purple. It's like a really dark, delicious purple. That's one of my favourite darks. I've got a dark green, so a very dark green to add to the purple. That's quite nice together. Then I've got a dark blue, and that's also going to help me make some beautiful blacks. So when you blend all of these together, if you blend these on your paper, so you get some really nice greeny blue tones. If I throw the purple on, it just creates this beautiful black colour. So try not to use black too much. The other thing I've got is this dark reddy colour, because red is complementary to green, and I can see a bit of red in amongst the trees there, and that's a lovely shadow kind of colour for your trees. So they're all my darks. Okay, and I forgot to get a cloth for my fingers, but I'll do that. And we'll do that now, otherwise I'm going to make all my other pastels grubby. So usually I like to have a cloth that is wet on one end. I'll just go and wet that actually. So I'll wet it on one end. And then you want to go pick up your lights. You're going to contaminate them all with your dirty fingers. So best to have a little cloth so you can keep them clean. All right, they're my darks. Now I've got some greens in here. I'll use a lot of the dark green throughout the trees. And this colour here, I'll use a little bit of that to get some of the light back in. And I'm going to probably go for this pale yellow, which is a lovely, see how dirty that was? It was hanging around with the red. Pale yellow, which is beautiful to get that light on the trees, just around the edges there. That'll be really nice. Okay, and I'll also use a little bit of that in the foreground. I'll use all of these in the foreground as well. So for the foreground, I've got a base yellow, that's this one. This is a nice big chunky stick. It's an Art Spectrum Extra Soft Square. I've got a deeper yellow, so you're going to need a couple of yellows. Sorry about the phone going off. You're going to need a couple of yellows. So this is like an ochre sort of yellow. And I've got a sunny yellow. And we want a little bit of this terracotta browny colour, because that's going to help us get some depth in here. So they're all my yellowy tones. Then I'll wipe my fingers again. I've got some purple and I want to put that underneath some of this yellow. So that's going to help me create some shadows under the grasses. Okay, so some of that with a bit of the green will be lovely. It'll make some really nice muddy tones. So when you mix things like that together, say purple and green, get these yummy shadow colors. So that's called making mud, and we love mud when we want shadows. I've got a pale purple as well. I can see that in some of the flowers. I meant to pick up a white, but I didn't. And I've also got a pinky color. And we can use this terracotta color for the darker flowers that have yellow petals. So that's basically my color palette. So if you want to pause this, you can do that, and then you can come back and we'll get started on the painting. Just going to focus that again. Strange how my iPad picks up my phone calls. That's weird, but anyway, I have to turn something off, obviously. All right, so turn me off, grab your colours, and then we'll start. I'm going to put my colours to one side so they're easy to find. It's also a good idea to keep them in a separate container to the rest of your pastels, because that way, if you need to, leave it today and come back tomorrow, you'll know which pastels you used. Just going to pause this and get a glass of water. All right. Okay, that's better. I've got some water now. All right, so yes, keep your pastels in a little container, and that way you know what you've used if you don't get done today. And we'll get started. So we're going to start from the back and work forward, and also from the top and work down. So as I said before, remember up in this back corner, we want to do that bit first because that's further away from all these trees that are sitting in front. And it's a kind of a grey, well, not grey, it's a greyed off area. So what I'm going to do is pop a bit of green in here. So come with me, let's do this together. Put a bit of green in there. This is my mid green, so I'm going to just wipe that on. So with pastels, you just want to lie it down on the page and rub it on like that. If you've got a really long stick of pastel, you might need to break it. I like working in pieces that are about this size. Anything longer is difficult to lie down and fill in with, unless you do drawing and you want them longer, but that's the size I prefer. So I'm going to put a bit of this mid green there. Then I'm going to get some dark green and put some of that in there too, because you can see sorry, it's really windy, everything's blowing around in here. To get that tree on the left to be a little bit lighter, we need to dull and darken the background behind it. So that little corner up there in the top left, a couple of greens, a dark green, and then over your mid green. And then to grey it off, I'm going to grab some purple, and that will send it off into the background, because I don't know if you've noticed, but when you look at mountains and things that are far off in the background, they always look a bit blue or purple. So that's going to grey off that area a little bit. So I'm just zhooshing a bit of purple over it. And that's my mid purple. And then I'm going to get my lighter purple. I can see there's a little bit of light through like that, something like that at the back. And then once you've got all those colours on there, and as I said, I'm sorry if I'm going a bit too quickly. It's a bad habit. I'll try not to. But once you've got your colours on there, then I just want you to get your finger and just do soft little squiggly movements like this. See how I'm just moving it in little round, fluffy kind of shape, because what I'm trying to do is get that to look like it's got trees or, something in the background. Nothing definite, but there's sort of shapes, vague shapes off in the distance. And if that feels like it's not dark enough, which I feel it might not be, Let's see, is it as dark as the foreground? It is a little bit dark here, just to this side here. And again, we've got to make sure that's nice and dark so we can get that light to shine. So remember we talked about making that dark so the light would shine. So put some dark, this is my dark purple, a little bit on that left and the right side of that. So if we put it here on the left side, then we put this tree in front of it, the light on the top of this tree will pop against the dark of that section there. And same over here. So putting it there and then putting this tree on top with the little bits of light that are going to come across is going to really make the light pop. So you've got to think about, how can I make the light bright, and plan ahead to get everything the right tone so that you can create that interest and drama. So now I've just put that dark purple down through there and I'm just blending it lightly in. Okay, I don't want to push too hard. I just want it to be quite soft and light. And then just pushing it around in the background a little bit more, just to create that blurry sort of effect. If you're working flat like I am, you might be getting a fair bit of dust on your page, which is what's happening to me. These dark purples are really crumbly. So what I'm going to do, instead of blowing it, which is very tempting, I'm going to just tip it off my page onto my cloth, which is why I always work on a towel or a cloth, because that way you can tip off your dust and put it all onto that and then take it outside later and give it a good shake. All right, so I'm going to leave that as it is. I think that looks okay. And if you look at your reference photo, you can see we've got the dark down here on the right and on the left, and it's a little bit sort of grey and soft at the top there. So that's the effect I wanted to achieve. I'm just going to soften that edge off a tiny bit more. Lovely. Okay, now what's got to be put in next? I think it's this tree here, because it sits behind this one. So we need to put this one in next. So let's start at the bottom of this tree. It's very dark at the bottom, and then as it comes up, it gets lighter. So we're going to use our blue violet or dark purple. If you don't have a dark purple, then just pick up the absolute darkest thing you can find. If it's only black, then it's only black, and that's that. You can't change it. But I don't like to use black until I have to, and I can't get any blacker than black, so I save it for the end. If I need more dark, then I've always got black to use. Okay, so I've just put some purple there. You can see how crummy it is. It's putting little bits of dust everywhere. I'm going to throw green over the top. This is that dark green, because I want to sort of mix them both together on the paper. With pastels, you mix on the paper. You don't mix on a palette or anywhere like you do with paint, because it's dry. So you've got to do all your mixing on your paper. I'm just going to pull some of that dark green up into there, because it's sitting behind these front branches on that tree that are lighter. So I need to get some dark in there as well to get the light to come forward. So a little bit of green and a bit of purple as well. Now I'm just going to push that in. And again, just soft little fluffy movements with my fingers. How do you work that out? So it depends on what I'm painting. I'll move my fingers in the direction of the thing that I'm painting. So in this instance, we've got organic leaves and branches and things like that. So we want to sort of keep our movements quite organic if we can. So no big stripes, no pulling down in the one direction, no. And what I love to do most of all is keep my finger on the paper, okay? So when I'm rubbing all this in, I don't lift up and do these dabs. I literally keep my finger on there and I run it around like that, because what that's doing is it's acting like a brush, and this is the paint. So it's sort of pulling the paint around, it's mixing it with the other paint, it's creating little shapes in different directions and different shadows. So I want to keep that consistent. All right. So now you might think, well, that's a bit dark, but it's okay, because we've got to put the dark down before we put the light on. So now I'm going to pick up my dark green. So I've gone up to here. I've left a little gap between the top of the tree and the thing behind it. But I'm going to get some more dark green in here. And see how it gets lighter off to the left side? So that's telling me the sun's on the left and it's darker on the right. So just zhooshing a bit of that dark green around there. You can hardly see it against the dark purple, but it's just going to help me, because when I put this green on, okay, this is my mid green. I feel like it might be a bit light, but anyway, we'll see how we go. This is my mid green. I'm just going to zhoosh that on in a couple of spots. So see how I'm just doing it lightly like this and dabbing it around, because what I want it to do is pick up the green underneath when I get my fingers into it, which won't be too much of that, but it's going to pick up the colors underneath it and kind of merge them together and start to make this beautiful green glow and the lighter tones that I want for this tree. So I'm filling in around the top now, up against that background that we did. I'm just pulling it, again, looking at the shape of the branches and pulling it across in that shape. So see how that's starting to look too dramatic at this stage, but we want to get this down on the paper so that we can then start to work with it. So it's like getting the paint down first, and then we can use our fingers as brushes and get some movement in there. It's looking quite nice, but it's a little bit too bright because I want to save my brights for this one and the one on the other side. So now I'm just going to dab it with my finger. If I blend, I'll lose all those definitions and it'll all become one big blob. So just dabbing softly like this, pushing it in softly where I don't want it to be too shiny, okay? So just dabbing it like that. See how that's creating a really lovely effect with the dark underneath that's making the shadow. And I'm just dabbing lightly, not blending, because we want to still retain those shapes that we've made. The minute you blend, you lose all of that detail. Okay, and now I want to just lighten up the top of it, but I don't want to go to the bright green or the light yellow because I want to save those for my lightest. So I'm going to pick up this yellowy ochre color and see how it's kind of a little bit lighter just around the top edge there. That's where the sun's catching it, okay? So I just want to make that area a tiny bit lighter, and then I can put a little bit of it, just a tiny bit here and here to lighten up those branches just a smidge. Okay, but I want to keep down in here really dark because we've got to get the light in front of that on the next tree. So I've just smidged that a little bit. I'm just going to dab it in again with my fingers. Dab, dab, softly, softly, just like that. And that'll do. That's that one done. All right, so don't overwork it. Don't push it around too much because it'll just turn to mud. If you push those colors, if I pushed all that in, it'd just turn to one big muddy blob, and then you've got to start again. So this is with pastels, you've got to be quite aware of how much to push it around and how much to let it sit on the top. And I really like how that's looking. So I'm going to tip off my dust. And then we can move across. Now, looking at the picture here, we've done this little bit here. But what I want to do now is get up into this area here that's behind all this other foliage. So up the top there, it's quite dark. We can't really see anything much in there. Yeah, there's not much to look at. It's sort of dark and gloomy in there. So let's work in this area here, because what I want to do then is get this tree in. It seems to be sitting in front of those guys as well. And then we can do that one on the right side last. So a similar process to what we've just done. We're going to darken off up in the top area here. So leave some uncovered. So this part where the big tree is going to go can stay uncovered. All right, but we've got to make sure we overlap the edges a bit so that we don't end up leaving a halo around it. I'm just going to bring the dark green down through here and into the bottom. I'd actually just pull that across there to the base of that middle tree. because we're going to put some purple over that and turn it into a lovely black. All right. So this is my purple. This is my dark purple. So this is how we make our beautiful dark tones and our shadow colors. See how dusty that is? There's so much dust. Let me see if I can push it in over here, because it's just such a waste when it loses all this dust. So pushing that in, and I'm just doing it in, again, round kind of shapes with my fingers to try and create, you know, that organic feeling of bushes and trees and things. Just pushing some dark up into there as well. I want to get the bottom of that tree nice and dark. Coming up here, make sure you fill in around where the light on the tree on the right is going to be, because it's got to come over the top of this and overlap, so we don't want gaps between that one either. All right, so we've kind of got this big dark blob thing going on. And now we can do a similar thing to this over on this side. We probably need a bit more. Let's throw some of this red in actually, because it's not quite as dark up the top there. So that lovely red that we picked up, reddy magenta kind of colour, it was in with the darks before. Let's pop a bit of that in, because that's going to create some nice shadows without being too dark. And just zhoosh a bit of that around with the green, so it makes a really yummy grey colour. It's good. Still got lots of dust, so I'll tip it off. Okay, now we're going to look at this area up in here. So that's this part here, all this foliage in the background there. We can't see very much, but we can see that there's branches of trees up the top in there, and there's shadow underneath them. So same as what we did over this side, we're going to do over here. All right, so just looking at the shapes of these trees or these shadows, just zhoosh a little bit of this around, just creating some interesting background foliage. Just sort of lying it down flat, giving a little smudge, lifting it up, getting the shapes of those branches in there. So they run horizontal, but they're not a straight, perfect line. They're all a bit fuzzy and messy. So that's the kind of look we want to get for that top area in there. Okay. And then I'm going to pop a bit more dark just in around here, a bit more of this dark purple, if that's delicious. Okay, and now once you've got some colour on there like that, then you can just start to dab it again. So just dab it. If you blend, you're going to make mud, and it will just go to a yucky big blob. So just dab like this with your finger, dab, dab, dab. What that does is push the pastel into the paper to make it stick better, and it also blurs it a little bit, because we just don't want this to be really hard and sharp. This is all off in the background, so we don't want to emphasize it too much. It's supporting the other bits and bobs. And if you've made patterns like I have, I can see patterns here. These are all going the same way. That's going off in La La Land. So I'm just going to try and amend a bit of that pattern making. Again, just using this stick of pastel on its side. It's a well-worn one, to create those sort of fir tree-like shapes. Okay, and then I can dab them in again. Just dabbing, dabbing, softly, softly, like that. So that's nice. And if you feel it's too dark, then you can always darken it down with a bit of your green or your blue. Let's see what blue does. Pop a bit of blue on here. This is my dark blue. Remember, we picked up a dark blue as well. That's nice to sort of use different darks to create a bit of interest, and it keeps the painting warm and interesting if you use different darks. So that's nice. And then I can just dab in the blue as well. Sort of quietens down the brightness of that green a tad, which is nice. I don't want it to be too bright. We'll save our brights for the really bright bits. Lovely. All right. So I'm quite happy with how that's looking. Could potentially be a tad darker up in there, but I'm going to just leave it as is for now. So I don't want to make it too muddy. Still. Remember too to always step back from your painting. So if you're doing a painting, when you're up close, it's very different to what it looks like when you step away. So make sure you constantly walk away and look at it from a distance. It'll make a big difference. Me sitting here, I can see it on the screen in front of me as I'm working on it. So it's like looking at it from a distance. It's really good, actually. You can see what's happening. When it's flat in front of you, it's much harder to see. All right, so that's looking pretty good. I'm quite happy with that. Looks a bit bushy and lush and thick, which is what we want. And now we can work on this big tree here. All right, so let's have a look at this one. It's got the dark down on the right bottom side, which we've started to do. And then we've got a lighter green on this side of the tree on the right side. So it's similar to the greens in the background here, but slightly more in focus. And then on the other side, we've got the same sort of greens. We've got a beautiful bright light catching on the edges there, which is quite delicious. That's what makes this so interesting. So let's start with some purple first. Let's put some purple up in here in the top area. This is going to create shadow under the green. So we need to get some shadow colours on there first. I could potentially leave the colour of the paper showing through, but because I'm a bit of a blender, I really like to just get the colour of the whole thing and then work with the pastel. That's my favourite thing to do. So just putting a bit of purple in there. And when you mix purple with green, it gets these beautiful greys. So that's going to create some lovely grey shadows for us. And again, I'm literally just dabbing my pastel down. I've got an edge. This is a square one, but if you've got a round one, you can still do the same thing with a round one. Just use the side of it and kind of just draw these little marks like this. And notice the shape of the tree. Like, look at the outside edges on this side, how they kind of bleed over into that dark area that we've just done before. So that's the thing we want to try and create. So just dabbing this down and getting those lovely branch shapes. The ones in front, so off to the side, you can see they've got definite shapes. And then we've got in the front, because they're coming towards us, they're foreshortened. So we can't see the length of the branch. We can just see the tips of it. So you need to change your marking as you come into the center, into smaller marks that kind of dash down a little bit. We're just trying to make them a bit smaller. And then back over onto the left side, we're just now starting to bring these branches across from the middle. Okay, so, and then all the way down the side into that dark area over there. This left-hand side comes all the way down nearly with a lighter edge on it. So bring that light green over that dark background so that we're not having any gaps between our trees and our background. So I know that doesn't look quite right yet, but we're working on it. This has got to come out a bit wider here, I think. It's looking like it's going to fall over. A bit wider there. We'll put the really light colour on afterwards. We're just getting this base down first. So once you've got that mid-green on there, I guess I want to make it wider up here too, because otherwise it does look like it's toppling over. A bit wider there. That's better. Okay, now I'm going to pick up my dark green and I'm just going to zhuzh a bit of that around too, using the same kind of movements, because obviously all these branches have shadow underneath them. And so there's more than one shade of green in here. So let's just put some of the dark green in. And you'll find different pastels will feel different. So this one's feeling a lot harder and not as soft as the one I just used. So they'll go down differently if they're a different brand. Sometimes different colors feel different too. Okay, so I'm just dabbing that around like that. Some down into this dark area, just so we can get that lovely continuation of the branches down into the shadows. Okay, so she's looking a little bit too bright. I'm going to throw a bit of that red back in there because I want to grey it off a little bit more. Get some more shadows happening in there. So I've got my mid green and then dark green and now a bit of red. Soon we're going to dab it with fingers and push this around a little bit so it'll start to kind of merge together. Make sure you merge it with that dark part of the tree too on that bottom there. Okay, so this is where we get to mix a little bit. So give your fingers a wipe if you need to. And now we're just going to kind of dab it. But as you dab, just move it in the shapes of the branches. So I'm sort of dabbing and pulling a tiny bit just to get those colours to merge together a little bit more. Okay, we can add more over the top. So if it goes a bit grey, don't stress. We're not literally blending too much. We're not getting our fingers in and really pushing it around. We're just dabbing and pulling a little bit so that the colours all start to merge together. Creating shadow here, which creating volume and texture and depth and shape. So pastels is all about layering. Well, this version of it is anyway. All right. So that's the greens done. Oh, sorry, greys. I'm going to tip the dust off. So now we've got that lovely grey thing going on. I can see that underneath these branches, and you've got to train yourself to look below things or behind. So what I'm looking for underneath there is the tones that we've got now. And then we can come back with the lighter greens and start to make these marks again. So I know it seems counterintuitive to be doing it twice, but you've got to set yourself up and you've got to make the background look right first before you can come back over with the main colours and shapes. So see how that's now starting to look like it's got this depth to it. But you've got to keep mixing the colours around a little bit to get that to happen. So just something like that. See how now it's starting to look a little bit more deep and tree-like, hopefully. Lovely. Something like that. Be making patterns again. Practice what I preach. I'm going to throw a bit of blue in just for some depth as well. So I'm going to shush a bit of blue around in here. It's kind of dark up through here. So just keep playing and dabbing and adding and throwing some colour on until you get it to look the way you want it to. It's coming along nicely. I'm going to just blur some of this off a little bit down here because it's a bit too definite. So that dark area can be kind of blurred off a bit, softened off so you can't see all the detail. I'm going to darken it again with a bit more purple. So, don't be afraid to come back with the dark and add more. Lovely. Good. All right. And then we get to put the light on. That's the fun part. So let's start. Don't go straight to your lightest light. Let's start with this ochre color first, because that can be a nice base. Because we're going down onto dark now, if we put the ochre down first, so this is like a mid-tone of the light color, so it's a mid-yellow. Put that down first, and then when we put the light yellow over the top, it will be much brighter because it'll sort of, this is like a buffer between the dark and the light edge, you see, because we've got the really dark stuff on the left, and then we've got, you know, dark-ish tones here through the tree. And that way, we're kind of doing this gradual bit of light down through here, coming down the side. I'm just doing soft little, almost like lines on the edge of the tree, trying to keep them looking natural if I can. Just coming down here into the base of the tree and then wandering off, so tapering off as you come down. And then up around the top. So the top, just here on the very top of the page, there's some light up in there. And then we can just maybe lighten up a couple of spots that might be poking out far enough to catch the sun, like that. Okay. Just a little bit of light, and then we'll put the bright or the lightest yellow on, and that's going to really make it pop forward. There's always a couple of light bits, you know, here and there that might be catching the sun. So just spread a little bit of the light around as well, because that's what nature does. Catches the things that want it the most, like the leaves and the branches that are reaching out for it. Okay, so that's okay. And then we can pick up the lightest yellow. So we're very dirty fingers now. So I'm going to clean those off so I can keep my yellow pastel as clean as possible. Give them a dry. Now this one, this is also a Art Spectrum Extra Soft. It's a bit smaller now, so I've used it a fair bit. But now I want to just get some of this on the very edges and touch it on here and there. See, softly, softly. Just go softly, softly. Don't overdo it, because if you put too much down, it won't look natural. You just want to touch it on like that and catch those edges. So if you've got a pastel with a sharp edge on it, you'll get a much better mark. Mine's not got a sharp edge. It's got edges, but they're not sharp because this is very soft. So softer pastels won't give you as sharp an edge as you might want. See how I've just touched it on? It's very soft, so it's just leaving soft little marks there. Coming up here into the top, off the page. You want those brightest areas just through there. And that's probably all we need to do for that now. So let's leave it. We can always come back and touch it up later on if we need to. So tipping off my dust. Is looking okay? Good, good. Now we can move over into this other side. Actually, no, I'm just going to come back in here for a second. I just want to add a bit more of my light or mid-green just to brighten up this area, because that'll be nice. Beautiful. That's a bit better, isn't it? Yeah. You've just got to notice those really subtle colour changes. And because this side's catching the light, it's also lightening up the branches that aren't actually in the sun. So we've still got to consider those and make sure that they, you know, stand out. Beautiful. I even want to go darker in here now. See, I'm looking at the darks now, working out that's where I need to go a bit darker. And then down in here, that's going to be darker too. So that's what you do. You just gently look around, notice that, you know, that's darker or lighter. And this is where the black and white picture comes in really handy too, because it'll help you find the darks and the lights. Lovely. Okay, tipping off. So are we happy with that? Do we like what's happening down here? Just want to make all that kind of merge in together for a big dark abyss. And just for fun, I'm going to see what this green will do. Might be a bit too limey. Quite nice. Put a touch of that on there as well. All right, now we move over into this right-hand side. So on the right, we've got a lot of dark right there on the very edge. And then as we come across, it gets lighter. We've got a bit more information in there. There's a bit more detail. So let's see how we go. Let's put our dark green down here, right on the edge of the page. And push that in with your finger. I'm going to put some red there too, because I can see there's a bit of a red tinge going on in there. That's pink, sorry, wrong one. This one. It's better, it's darker red. And then I can push that in. I'm going to push it in running sideways. So again, keeping my finger on the page, but just running it sideways in the direction of those branches of that tree. I think will make it more interesting. Coolio. And now we're going to look at the colours in this. So what I can see in here is a bit of this terracotta-y, orangey kind of tone. So I'm just going to start to put a bit of that on here, just on the, not right on the edges that are the brightest edges, but see how it's got those little bits of highlights of the colour that's running through them, through there. So I just want to get a bit of the terracotta into that section there. Okay, and as you can see, I've tried to keep kind of the shape of what I can see happening here. And then I'm going to come back, actually I can see up in here, there's a little bit of a greenish, lighter green thing going on in there. Can you see that? It's probably attached to this guy. So bring that across into that dark area so it stands out a bit more. And then I'm going to zhoosh a bit of green down through here as well. Like that. Beautiful. And now we can dab it. So we want to dab it and then we'll put the highlights on. So I've got a dirty finger, which is okay at this stage because I just want to blur this off a little bit. Just dabbing, dabbing, dabbing. Don't rub it. Don't rub it. If you rub it, you're going to lose all those beautiful marks we just made and it'll turn to mud. Okay. So I've been dabbing. See this big fingerprint here in that dark area? I've got to get rid of it. So I'm just kind of pushing it around a little bit to make that go away. Try not to get fingerprints into your artwork. It's really difficult when you're blending. All right. Oh, I like how that's happening. Okay, now I'm going to come in with this ochre colour because there's a fair bit of that in there too. I'm just going to zhoosh a bit of that around. So using the end of the pastel, I'm not lying it flat, but I've tilted it up a little bit. So I want a soft edge. I don't want a hard line. So to get a soft edge, you can just tilt the pastel a little bit and use that part of it, that part of the end there, not the sharp edge. I'm just zhooshing it around. See, I'm just zhooshing it in the shape of that tree, and the light parts that I can see through there. So it's kind of these horizontal shapes. And put that out where you want to put some of the yellow, the bright yellow, because remember, if you put this colour or something similar to it underneath, then the brights will be brighter. They'll really pop on those two sections there that we want to be really lit up. Beautiful. Well, mine aren't in quite the right spot. Never mind. They're trees, so they're never perfect. Okay, and then I'm just going to darken off again on the right side with some blue because I can see it's getting a bit light now. I want to make a bit more dark happening in here because that gives us the drama. So put some blue in and then I'll pop some purple over the top to darken that off some more. Dark purple, my blue violet, or deep dark purple. If you ever buy a set of purples, make sure you get these beautiful dark violets. They're so yummy. All right. And I'm going to dab that again, just on this side. I'm going to leave the left side looking as it is, because then I can pop the light over it on those little branches that poke out. Beautiful. Now, this is bothering me. I feel like I haven't got enough light, or there's too much, or something's not right over here. I'm just going to touch that up a little bit more while I've got this in my hand. That's a bit better. I feel like it needs to be much lighter here, because where this tree is taller than that one next to it, it's like it's catching the light above it almost. And this is not quite as bright, so I'm just going to dab that with my fingers and grey it down a bit. All right, back over to here. Putting a bit of light on here. And don't do a hard line, because these are little leaves and stuff catching the light. So they're all little small things. So just do small marks. Small, soft little dots and things like that, just to indicate that they're leaves and they're not a big solid object. I'm going to come back over it now with my dark green. It's a little bit too much bright in there. To blend things or get them to go down in tone, if it's too bright or too light, just put another darker colour over it. Quite like that now. That'll do. That'll do indeed. Yep, not bad. And there's just a few smidges of light just throughout here, and they're not the bright yellow, they're the mid yellow. So I'm just, it's that ochre colour. I'm going to touch a couple of spots there too to give that a little bit more light, just as it's coming around the tree. This one must be sitting forward of the others maybe, and catching the light of the sun. There we go. Lovely. These are looking a bit too much like a pattern. Just break the pattern a little bit. Don't want them all looking the same. Lovely. All right, good. So I'm pretty happy with how that's looking. I think that will do for now, and then we might move on down into the foreground and the water. So let's have a look at this water. I'm having a look at it on my screen next to me, and it's a kind of this mustard colour. So I'm going to make it that colour. Because everything's so yellow, we may as well. So using that mustard ochre kind of colour, just fill in that section there with the mustard, because that's our river. And then give it a little blend. And as you blend, you might pick up some of the dark from the riverbank. That's okay, doesn't matter, we can pop more on. Okay. So now I'm going to put, what else is in that colour? There's a kind of a limey green colour. So put a bit of this green in there. Just touching a bit of green on. And then I might put a bit of this bright yellow in. See what happens. So just have a play with some colours. Don't be afraid to mix paper, colours on the paper and see what happens. Because if it doesn't work out, you can just go over it. And if you can't go over it because it's too much on the paper, give it a spray with workable fixative, and that will set everything else underneath, and then you'll be able to add more on top. Okay. So, and it's kind of, you can just see there's a lighter kind of area there. I know it's hard to see in the notes. Something like that, I think, would be nice. That looks okay. And just put a bit of this back in. It's kind of this murky, browny, yellowy colour. Probably just reflection of all the other stuff around it. It's probably not quite as dark as bright as that up against the bank. So we've got to think about the grasses that are going in front of it too, because they need to be lighter. So if we dull it down a tad, Just this is the terracotta colour I'm putting on. I'm just pushing that in to make it a bit more muddy. I think it's still a bit too light, actually. Let's see, what can I dull it down with? A bit of purple. Purple always works well to make things slightly more grey. Ah, now we'll put it's better. Lovely. Yeah, good. Good. All right. So I'm going to tip off the dust again. This time I'll tip it downwards. So whichever way you tip it, just be aware that often it'll, if you're using this gritty paper, it'll kind of hang on and catch it as it falls. So if you want it to not get caught up in the work you've just done, tip it the other way. All right, let's get stuck into this part. This will be fun. So I'm going to pop some green down in here. Zoom out that picture now so I can see all of it. All right, so there's quite a lot of green under this yellow. So let's zhoosh some green in here. We're just going to block in now. We're going to go big and bold and loose, and then we'll get tight as we work on the details. All right, so lots of green in here. The grass that's growing up amongst all these flowers. Any direction, because this is pretty much like we're making the dirt underneath, you know. So a bit of green. I really like the background. I like how that's working. The trees are nice. Love trees. Okay, green. Now I'm going to throw a bit of this terracotta into some dirt, make some mud. Nice. Just not everywhere. Kind of just spread it around so it's not the same colour all over. I'm going to try and, when we blend this, hopefully we'll create, you know, kind of different colours here and there of the same, similar tones, or with different tones actually. So that's a bit of terracotta over the green. What we're doing is we're putting down the dirt under all the flowers. So don't look at the flowers and the stuff. We're putting what's underneath them. And now for the purple. This is the lighter purple, not the really dark purple. Okay, because all this area is not really, really dark like the background. So can you see that there's sort of shadow through there? It's a bit hard to find, but if you squint or even look at your black and white picture, you can see the little areas of darker grey throughout the grass there. So put your purple where you can see those bits, where it's a bit darker. We're trying to create some shadow, some tone, maybe some bumps and lumps in the dirt underneath all this. Okay, so we want a nice little range of marks and shapes on there. Keep it quite random if you can. I'm going to tip off my dust again, going downwards this time. And now I'm going to blend it all in. So I'm going to use probably 2 or 3 fingers. And I'm just going to blend it in, and I want to run my fingers in a circular kind of organic direction. So I'm going back and forth using little curly marks. I want the edges, so the edge against the water and the background, I want them soft and blurry. Don't make them hard lines, because we want to soften those off so we can put those bits of grass and stuff up on top of them. So just running my fingers around here, up and down, little up and down movements, little round ones, just changing direction, getting some variation in the texture. See how that's all blending in, creating a really nice undercoat for my grasses. Where you might want it to go muddier or grayer, press a bit harder. So here, for instance, if I press harder, see how dark it goes? It's quite amazing what a difference it makes when you press harder too. So be aware that you can change the tone of something by pressing harder with your pastels and making them more mud. Okay, and then as I'm coming forward now, I'm just going to start to do little up and down movements like this. I'm not taking my fingers off the paper. I'm literally running it over the paper, keeping them on there so that I keep a nice consistent movement. I'm going up and down here, more so here in the front, because that's the shape of the grass that I want to get in the front there. So see how that's all blended in now? And we've got purple and green and terracotta in there. It's made a really nice muddy sort of base now for our grasses. So I can tip off my dust again. Okay, we've got a lovely base. So next thing we need to do is start to put in some grassy marks. And we've got to study this because looking at the picture, you can see at the back, we can't really see much detail. We can see a few little flowers and little light and dark blobs or shapes, but we can't really see any detail. It's kind of all just fuzzy. And then as you come forward in the picture, you can see those stems of the flowers and the grasses much easier because they're closer to us. So we've got to fuzzle this stuff off at the background here. We don't want to put every blade of grass in. That'll take a month of Sundays and then some. So picking up, what do we want? I might pick up this bright or this mid-tone yellow. Right, remember I've got a darker yellow, that's the mustard yellow. Then I've got this yellow, and then I've got my very light yellow. All right, and we'll use some green in here as well. And maybe a bit of blue too. So they're my colours that I'm going to be using. I'll try to keep them over here so we can keep an eye on them so you know what I'm doing. I may pick up others as we go, but anyway, I'll leave them there. So I'm going to pick up this yellow. This is the bright one in the middle. And I'm just going to start to zhoosh it around. See how I'm zhooshing it lightly like this? So I'm holding it flat on the page. And then I want you to, if it's a flat stick, just tip it a little bit up. So you've got pressure on the one end, pressure on this end, and lifting up this end. And we're just going to rub it up and down like this in a grass direction. Okay. And go softly, because what we want to do is try and get that fuzzy edge of the grass up against the trees there at the background. All right. So just go softly. We want to keep it kind of not straight lines. So we've got a couple little tufts of grass up there that are different shapes. So some are tall, some are short. So just keep moving that up and down like this. And then coming across here in front of the river, right? Same thing. We want to vary the height of our mark. That's going to be a good base for our grasses. We've done one row, and now we can come across and we can do another one. Now, every now and again, press a little bit harder and you'll make a stronger mark like that. See how that's more yellow than some of the others. And you can use the side of your pastel just to create some little grassy shapes like that. So we're just building this up nice and soft. And we're going to do this all the way down the page, all right? And so we're starting off shorter marks up here. Looking at your picture, look at the clumps. Where it's a little bit brighter yellow, you might want to press a bit harder and make a brighter clump. Try not to make rows. That's the hardest part. So we're kind of going across in a row. Try not to do that. See if you can break up those rows and not have stripes throughout it. There's no stripes in this picture. But see how that's making the grass now? So this is the mid-tone yellow. We're going to come back and do similar marks, probably a bit less, with the mustard colour. And then we'll do a few greens and other things in there. So we're just going to make the grass, really. Just going to grow the grass. We're going to get all this thick, lush stuff in first, because that's underneath, isn't it? It's underneath all those little flowers. Just running around, just using the end. Don't try not to do these ones yet. We don't want to do that. You'll be here forever. We'll do some of those later, like we'll come back and put some of those in later like that at the back. But at the moment, we just want to sort of get this soft coverage of fuzzy kind of marks that aren't too hard. Oh, it's nice, lovely. Be patient, keep working at it. As you get to the front, we're going to do them a bit taller. And make them a little bit taller, like up to here. All right, but still no fine lines yet, no hard lines. Let's keep it all soft and blurry. And now that's why I couldn't put the pastels on my board, because I would tip my dust off all the time. I'll move it over a bit. You can see my colours. Tipping off. Ooh, I think I'm going to love this one. I do love a landscape, I have to say. Okay, so now we've got that coat of yellow underneath. I'm going to come back in. I'm just going to do a little bit of the green as well here and there. This is the mid green. It's like that limey green, but it's not really bright green. Just zhoosh that around as well. Same sort of marks, but not everywhere. So we're just kind of, now we're scattering our colours around a little bit. Right, I'm getting some greens in there too, because there's a lot of green under all the yellows all around it. So same thing, just on its side, zhooshing it up and down. It's a nice wide one, so I can put it down flat. Don't forget the corners. Always leave the corners empty and you have to go and fill them up again. So make sure you get your corners and your bottom bits all filled up. Bit of green, that's nice. I'm going to pick up the blue and I'm just going to zhoosh a bit of blue here and there. Okay, I'm just going lightly with it. Where I can see there's some darker sort of shadow areas, let's get some blues in there. Just to create a bit of difference in the brown. That gives us shapes, lumps and bumps. And keeping it lying down softly on its side. If you haven't got a really dark blue, then maybe you could try a purple or a dark green. Just creating a bit of extra tone throughout this grassy stuff. All right, good. Let's see what this lime green does. This is a little stick of, it's called Blue Earth, this brand. And the sticks come in these gorgeous little squares. And they're awesome because you get a really sharp edge, so you can do a line like that with them. Or you've got the side that you can do wider marks with. So that's quite yummy. So I'm just going to do, what we're doing is we're building up the grasses, okay? So with this one, I'm just going to put a few little highlights here and there using this limey green colour. And I'm going to start to just pull up a few strands of grass into that dark background a little bit. Not too much, we don't want to overdo it. Just keep it kind of soft, but see how they just glow against that dark? So delicious. That's what's exciting, when you can get that lovely light against the dark. But you've got to keep it kind of soft. We don't want to overdo it too much. And when we do come up beyond the level of the grass in front of the water in the background, you want quite fine lines because they're all fine little stems or grasses. So that's when you want to tip your pastel onto its end or its side to get those fine lines going on. Okay, so I'm just going to put a bit of this here and there. These little Blue Earth ones are yummy and so nice. They're lovely and creamy. Just a little bit of that around. It's lovely, isn't it? I'm going to put not so much of it down in the foreground. What I want to do in the foreground is highlight some of those flowers with my lights. So I don't want too much light grass around them, because then they won't shine too much. Just a few bits and bobs, not too much. I probably went a bit overboard up there, but anyway. I like how it's looking. So literally just got to fill up your page with all this grass, much like we did with the charcoal. I'm actually holding this one flat on the paper and kind of tilting it now and again to get a sharp edge because it's got that lovely sharp side on it. That one. Then I'm going to come back now with this ochre colour and start to do some of these more refined lines, I suppose, through here. So using the end of the stick now, so I'm getting a finer line happening. This is a round pastel, it's probably an art spectrum, and I'm using the end of it. It's got a nice sharp end. It must have been broken recently. If you're looking for sharp ends on the stick and you haven't got one, you might need to break it, and that will give you that lovely crisp edge. So I'm just pulling a few of those light ones up through there as well. I don't want all the light ones to be the same colour. So I'm just putting this beautiful mustard colour through here again. And now we're sort of working up to doing finer marks, finer lines, because we've got a lot of the background in, so we can start drawing more grass in. Okay, so I'm literally just going up and down here with my grassy marks, tilting some, put some on the side. Don't make them all the same height or the same shape or direction. See if you can kind of mix it up a little bit, because they're all going in different directions, aren't they? But some sort of go sideways, some have a little bit of a curve on them, and we're just running our grass down the page. And you have to break the line sometimes, you know, where it's got maybe some grass here like this. You put one across in front of it like that. That'll help to break the patterns. And as you're doing this, what's happening is the stick of pastel, if it's a harder one, will be picking up the other colours underneath. And I don't mind that, because then it sort of helps to blend everything and create a really nice combination of colours and tones. Just filling it up, lots and lots of grass. It's quite meditative to do this. I'm keeping my touch quite light. Where I want a harder line, I'll press a bit harder. If I want it nice and light, I'll just go nice and light, running it around. Like that. I'm going to throw some purple in a minute. So I think we need some shadow, a bit more shadow, but we'll do grassy shapes with the purple, and that might help to create some shadows. That's probably enough of my ochre colour. I love it though, it's looking nice. Where's my purple? This one here, this purple. So it's not the darkest one that we put up in the trees, it's that middle purple, but it's lovely. See how that creates beautiful shadows against the stems of the grasses that we've done. So just not everywhere, but just here and there, just to get a little bit of depth back in there. You can hardly notice it. Again, using the end of the pastel, so we're using the nice crispy sharp end if you've got one. If you haven't got one, you might have to break it again. So these sharp edges are really good for doing grasses and fine lines. Pencils are good too, but they don't tend to go over pastel so well. So if you have pencils, try to use them without the pastels. You know, pets and fur, stuff like that are really good for pencils. And they work beautifully on pastel paper, of course. So see how the purple's just given it a bit of depth. It's made it look like it's lovely and thick and lush. And we've still got variation of tone through there, so we can see darker spots and lighter spots. That's really what we're looking for. Beautiful. So that's the purple. I'm going to put a bit more down here in the front. So it's creating a really nice range of tones. Now I want to put a bit more light grass in again. So I'm going to come back with this yellow. That's the one we started with. I'm just going to put a few pieces of grass in through there. So when they interrupt each other and cross over each other, that's when it starts to look natural. See how that I've got a few crossing over now? And these lighter yellow ones, they're catching the sun. So that's nice to have some highlights in there to catch the sun. And then darker ones where they're in shadow. It's just about varying the colours and the marks. Lovely. Bit more yellow over here, I reckon. I can see a fair bit of yellow tone through there. And some clumps in the grasses over there. A little bit of brighter zhooshing there. The trick is to keep your hand loose and to keep your movements loose. So try not to get too tight. See how that little bit of brighter yellow there just highlighted that bit of grass, and that's what we want to do. We just want to highlight a couple of spots where it's a little bit lighter, catching the sun. Tall ones that catch the sun. Cool. Now, we're not going to put every single flower in here because we'll be here for a year. So let's have a look at these flowers. Now we've got some grass in there. I'm pretty happy with how my grass is looking, so I'm going to leave it now as is and start to add the flowers. Okay, so remember what we did with the charcoal when we put a little dark mark down and then we put a light one on the top. Let's see if blue will work. I don't know whether it'll be dark enough, but anyway, we'll try it. So you've got to try these things before you know, and if the blue is not going to work, then we might use the blue violet. I'm just going to dab a few of these around, and they're pretty small at the back there, and then as they come forward they get bigger. So we're just going to dab a few of those in there. All right, and then I'm going to pick up my pale yellow. This is my lightest. That's the lightest that we used over there on the trees. I'm just going to put a little dash or a dot on top of each one of these blue things. See if that will look like their little flowers are popping up. That could work. They're a bit too bright, I think. I think we need to quieten those ones down a bit because they're further away from us. So if I come back over it with my mustard colour and shush it up a bit, save the lights for last, I say. That's better. And then these fellas need a bit of a stem, don't they? So they can have a dark blue stem. It's a bit thick. Just a suggested stem on some. There we are. That looks quite lovely. And then there's a lot in there, but we're not going to do all of them. Go back over to the back there. So you can see at the back here, we've got little ones that poke up into the background, and they look to me like they've got bits of purple on them. So let's put some purple dots in there, just on the ends of those grasses and across there. Some are taller, some are shorter. And then we'll highlight the tops of those as well. Might use the light purple for that. See if it's light enough. When I'm trying to put lights in, I like to try to start with not the lightest and then work my way up to the lightest. That way, you know, if I use a yellow instead of a white, then I've still got white up my sleeve. So I like to kind of save the light for last, and then if I really need to add white, I can. Often you don't need to. Often a lighter yellow or a pale blue or something like that is enough. Some of these down through here, some little dots around in here. So you can hardly see the purple dots at the background there because it's a purple on a dark background. But I think we'll see what happens when we put a little bit of the light on top of them. Because we can't see the detail, we're just drawing shapes because that's all we can see. Purple up under these guys as well. I'm wondering if purple's a better option. Maybe a bit of both. It's quite nice. So let's see if I get my light purple. Now this is the light purple. We haven't really used it much. I'm just going to dab a touch of that on to these fellas in the background. Put some down in the grass as well, because they're not all sitting up in that above the grasses, but put some down inside the grass so it looks like it's all continuing on. And the light bits need to sit on top of the darker purples. Yeah, it's okay. I'm going to put a bit more yellow stems in there though. I think it needs a bit of, they look like they're floating now, so I'm going to add, I've got to give them some stems. Or maybe a bit more yellow. Let's see, a bit of yellow over that purple. This is my big chunk of yellow. It's hard to find a tiny dot when they're a big stick like that. That's nice. Ah, yes, now we're in business. It's purple and yellow together, yummy. Just putting some little dots of yellow, not on all of them either. So, you know, some are facing a different way, some might not be catching as much light. Just put it on some. And that makes it look more natural. And then I'm going to dot a few dots of yellow just down here in the grass as well, because that will say, you know, there's more down in here. It's growing everywhere, not just on the edge. So it kind of continues through. That's what we want to do. Continue it down in through the grass. See how that's now starting to look like little flowers or something. Some are brighter than others, and that's great. That's what we want. Just dotting around. Cute, cute, cute. Yeah, lovely. So that's quite nice, and don't overdo it. We don't want to have too much going on over there. Just do some more little bright dots through here. Check for patterns, try not to make patterns. It's really hard not to. And maybe adjust or change the size of some of your little dots too. Like some are really quite a bit bigger than others. So varying the shapes of those. Coming down, bring some more down in through here. And then we can kind of start to work on these bigger flowers. Okay. So and then you can come back and I think we should just sort of dance around in here and put some little dots and things here and there that could be, you know, different flowers growing in there. You don't have to have the same as what's in the picture. You can make your own flowers. So the purple's a really good colour for that, just to create that lovely lush green or, you know, flowery effect. And as we get closer to the front, then we can see a bit more detail. So we can start to really add some more shine and colour onto some. The purple's a really good base though to build on. Some big ones there. Just dotting them around, trying to make them look as natural as possible. There's some little pinky ones too, so I'm going to throw some pinks in here. Just some dobs of pink here and there. The pink one up there that sits on the top, put them in there. So just little dots. They're just shapes, all right? So don't get too caught up in petals and all the business, because we can't see them from here. They're too far away. We're just suggesting little shapes now. Look at the picture and see, you know, how they're spread out. They're not all rows, they're all sort of random everywhere. So a little bit of pink, that's nice in there. And then coming forward, I'm going to use my light purple on those white ones. I know they look white, and they are essentially, but let's put them in as light purple. And then we can add a bit of a light to them to brighten them up. We can also pop a bit of dark purple underneath them to give them more shadow. So this is kind of the mid-tone for those little light ones. Remember, they get smaller as they get further away and then bigger towards the front. We've got some bigger shapes here. Now I'm just squiggling shapes. I'm not putting in, you know, all the detail. You don't need to. So just squiggling shapes like that. These ones here in the front are lovely, and we'll get some highlights and shadows onto them so they'll really look nice together. Okay, so just squiggling a few little light coloured ones around like that. There's a pinker one there, but that's okay. Little ones, big ones, all sorts. So we've got our base colour down for the light ones. That's this light purple or mauve or lilac kind of colour, which is a lovely base because it helps to create shadow and it'll give us something to start with. So now we've got that there. Let's pick up our darkest. This is my darkest purple. Be careful, we don't want much, but we're just going to dab a little bit of it on the bottom of this one, and then I want you to dab it with your finger just to smidge it in a bit. Okay, so it's like the base of the flower we're doing, that bottom bit there. So I'm just going to dab it on to some of these, more so the ones in the front that we can see closer up. And a few up there. And then we're going to dab them all so that they kind of sink in a little bit and create some shadow. It's a very crummy pastel, this one, so there's a lot of dust on there already. Wipe my finger. I'm just going to dab like this, and then you might want to wipe your finger off in between dabs. And I'm just sort of pulling some of that purple up into that lilac colour, softening off that darkness to create shadow. Give your finger a wipe in between every few because it'll put dark back down if you don't want to do that. You need to wipe your finger off. Okay, see how they're now looking like they've got some shadow underneath them? That's a bit nice. I want to put a dark stem on some. I'm just going to try the dark green. I don't know if that's going to be sharp enough. Depends on the pastel, but sometimes they're not. Can't get a sharp edge, but this one's okay. So I just want to put a stem on some because that will, you know, sink them into the dirt. They don't all have to have stems. Maybe just do the ones or some in the front that we can see clearly. Because if they're closer to us, we'll be able to see them more so than the ones that are at the back. So just doing these little stems, something like that. That one's a bit too strong. If it's too strong, just give it a dab, go over it with another colour, whatever you need to do. Try purple. Purple would work too. The stems. The other thing I was going to pick up was a bit of charcoal. So if you've got a stick of charcoal and you want to get a fine line in, sometimes that will work too. It's not too dark, so it's nice for a mid-tone. And you can use charcoal with pastels, so that's nice too. So it's just giving them somewhere to grow from, really. There's one that goes right across. I like that one. I like how it sort of goes over there. Let's make one over there. Let's draw the stem first. So there's this one that it's a yellow flower, comes across like this in front of those other guys. So the things that are in front won't be interrupted with other marks or lines. Charcoal's nice for that. Yeah, so that if we have a stem like that, and then this flower's yellow with this orange center, so I'm going to make it yellow. Could be a bit too bright, this yellow. So it's just on either side because the middle of it sits up in the center. So, and we can't see the petals behind that. So it's just a vague shape like that. Let me see if I can define it a little bit more. And then I want to get my terracotta color and make a little mound in the middle. Sunflower sort of thing. Something like that. It's going to rise up a bit more. Might pop a bit of red in it too, just to make it a bit darker. That's fun. So yeah, a couple of those yellow shaped flowers. It's got a shadow underneath as well, so I'm going to put a bit of red under the shadow. That looks nice. So something like that. I feel that's a bit too dark now, but anyway. Put some more in just to even it up. There's another little yellow one down here. So you can kind of wander around the painting, draw in some of the yellow flowers. I don't like that line there. Get rid of it. It's too strong. Go over it with a bit of yellow just to soften it off a tad. There, that's better. But before we do that, let's go back to these little blobs that we did with the lilac, all right? So I'm just going to touch some of those up a little bit more. We put the lilac down and we put the dark underneath. And I want to lighten some of those, get some highlights on those too, because that's what we're doing. We're sort of creating this beautiful shine. So let's try the yellow. I feel like I need to go and get some white, but we'll see if this works. And we're just doing some little dabs like that. What we're trying to say is, you know, these are petals and they're all in pieces. So it's not just one blob, it's pieces of petals. But pull the pastel for the light just in the direction of the shape of the petals. Like that. Right. We just need to put a blob on the top. I think that's better, actually. I like the blob. It's a bit stronger. Just makes them a little bit more highlighted. If there's too many highlighted and you don't like it, just pop the purple back over the top. Easy peasy. Yeah. But this is the lightest, isn't it? So I might just put a little bit of that around as well. Just add a few little bright spots. Here and there. As I said earlier, you don't want to overdo it with your lights because then they become diluted and they're not the lights anymore. They kind of get a little bit lost in the crowd. So we can let's do another couple of these yellow flowers so there's not just one sitting there. Let's do one over here. So we've got one here. And again, we can just see the sides and the front petals. We can't see the back ones because it's got that lovely big center. And then we can put another one maybe next to it over here somewhere. Make it a bit yellower. So I'll come back over that ochre colour with my lighter yellow. And then we put a bit of the terracotta in here for the center, with a little circle. And then we use that dark pink just to get some shadows and dark and a bit of definition underneath. There we go. Easy peasy. I want to get rid of this stem, don't like it. I'm just going to go over that now with some green and some yellow. So when you've got to get rid of stuff like that, you just kind of need to redo some of the background a little bit. It's better. This, you can have a stem that goes down here. I didn't like what was happening with it. And we don't have to draw the whole thing in. We can sort of just suggest it. Suggest that it goes down there somewhere. That's nice. So if you want to carry on and add more flowers, you can. If you're happy to leave it with as it is there, then that's cool too. It's up to you now. So I'm going to call it quits. I think that's quite lovely as it is. I'm going to leave it just like that because I like it. It's not too busy. It's just soft and beautiful. And see how that beautiful background just pops now with the lights in front of it. Really lovely. Love it. Love, love, love. Yeah, add some more flowers if you want to do what you like. Send me a photo when you're done because I do love to see what everybody does. And leave me a review on my Google business listing at Delicious Art if you like. It'd be lovely if I could have some reviews on there. I've got a few, but there's, never enough. So thank you for joining me today. The other thing I meant to say was don't forget to sign your name. So I'll just sign it with a bit of charcoal, pencil, or whatever you've got handy. And then you can frame your masterpiece. Right. Have a beautiful day, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for coming.